Okay, hello everyone, fellow LFG presenters. In this talk, we try to bring together LFG analysis and formalisms to capture corpus-based evidence in relation to distinct semantic preferences of verbs in different voice morphology in Indonesian. In this talk, we divide our presentation into two main parts. After the preliminaries, we present corpus-based evidence regarding distributional differences of senses across different verbs in different voice morphology. And after that comes the LFG analysis to capture that usage variations. So now let's start from the preliminaries of the study.
Well, voice alternations such as active and passive are generally viewed as a meaning-preserving phenomenon. It means that the active and passive clauses, based on the same verbal root, should describe the same kind of event or evoke the same logical meaning. The alternation modifies the linking of grammatical relations and semantic roles. For instance, the non-subject patient in a two-argument active clause becomes the subject in the passive. In these examples, the base verb is kenakan in the sense of to wear, like clothing. It has different prefix marking for its active usage, using men prefix in one and the prefix for its passive usage in two. Based on these two examples alone, it is clear that the verb does convey the same event of wearing a clothing in one and two. Thus, its meaning is preserved in active and passive. However, looking at only one pair of examples to describe voice alternations fails to capture the preferred usage co-occurrences for its voice, as revealed, for instance, by language corpora. In our case, we investigate whether the passive counterpart of the presumed active voice form always conveys the same meaning or event, or used in the same way as the active, especially if we look at many usage instances of the passive and active pairs of the same verbal stem. We'll show that active and passive forms of the same verbal stem can show distinct statistical preferences to convey a certain meaning or event. So we argue that voice alternation is more than just relinking grammatical relations and semantic roles, and not always a meaning-preserving phenomenon. Instead, it involves meaning construction with its constraint, morphosemantics, and usage properties that may differ between voice types. We demonstrate this based on quantitative corpus-based evidence by analyzing the verbal root kena, get hit, as a case study in active and passive voice morphologies and different applicative suffixes. LFG analysis attempts to capture such quantitative usage evidence and the mechanism of meaning constructions.
Okay, so now I will continue again with these two other examples, example 3 and 4, where in these examples, we look at 4 different verbs that we analyze in this study. Okay, and these 4 verbs are based on this root kena that we have mentioned before that can derive these 2 stems with e suffix and kan suffix. And these 2 stems can take these 2 voice morphology, meng and d for passive. Okay, so if we look at example 3, this example conveys the event of dirty water hitting someone's shirt. And this hitting event is expressed by this stem, kenai, in the active. And this event of hitting, in other words, in contrast, cannot be expressed by this stem, kenakan. So they cannot be interchangeable in this sentence to express hitting sense. So that's why we cancel out this hitting sense for this stem in the active, but we tick that for this stem in the active. And if we look at the second example, example 4, they have it has these 2 verbs in the passive of the 2 stems, kenakan and kenai in the passive. And here they can be interchangeable to express this meaning, impose or subject to. Okay, so kenai, kenakan are interchangeable in this sentence to express this meaning. And as we will see later on, this meaning, imposing or subject to, is the most frequent for these verbs. Okay. So as initial, form meaning pairings of these verbs and the meanings, we see this that from this graph that the kenai and the kenakan can express impose, but hitting is not possible for kenakan in active, but possible for kenai in active. Our corpus-based study tried to escalate the examples that we analyzed so that we can get the distribution of the senses in relation to their forms. So we analyzed all usage occurrences of these four verbs based on kena. Well, mengenai actually is also now grammaticalized into preposition in Indonesian, so we only look at the lexical use of mengenai. And we analyzed the senses that they convey in the examples, whether wearing, subject to, or hitting. Okay, and then we summarize their distribution and perform simple distributional statistics. As the first result, we compare the stem kenai in its passive and active voice form. And in this graph, the distribution of senses in the passive is on the left, and active is on the right. So the y-axis is percentages of the senses. The first point that we can see from this graph is that the most frequent meaning of these verbs in active and passive differ. Okay, imposing is much more frequent. Yeah, it's the most frequent in the passive. Meanwhile, physical hitting is the most frequent in the active. Okay, even though we see this sense to be expressed in passive as well, but this sense is not equally frequent in active and passive. And the empirical evidence that we try to emphasize in this talk and in the study is that this sense, imposing, is not available in the active. It means that the passive is not derived from the active, okay, in the sense of expressing imposing. Okay, so this meaning of impose or subject to is directly constructed in the passive, okay, through morphological constructions of D, kena, and E. Okay, there is no derivation from active to passive for this sense. Okay, well, this is just repetition of example 3 that we've seen before. If we look at the second results now for the stem kenakan in passive and active, we see that in the passive form, the kenakan, imposing is the most frequent still, but wearing is also more frequent than expected by chance. And in contrast, in active, even though imposing is expressed in active as well with mengenakan, but it is not that frequent. Instead, wearing is the dominant sense to be expressed by active kenakan. Okay, so what we learn from this graph is that we know that these two senses can be expressed in active and passive, but their distribution is different. And we might say that, well, yeah, the wearing sense may illustrate the typical meaning-preserving voice alternation of these verbs. Okay, oh yeah, so this tiny fraction of hitting sense is available as well in mengenakan that we before cancel out by looking only at one example. So this is the example of kenakan that express hittings. But most of this example, yeah, 4 out of 7 examples, is not followed by direct object, but rather preposition, which resembles the English conative construction, like, he hits at the ball, he kicks at the ball, and so on. Yeah, so if we now compare the passive of these two stems, this is just repetition of the previous graph. We see that imposing is still the most frequent in the passive, so it makes sense that they kind of compete. Yeah, these two passive verbs compete in expressing this sense because they are the most, this sense is the most frequent in these two forms, but they are not interchangeable to express this wearing or physical hitting, okay, because these two senses are not available in one of these verbs. Okay, as a summary, the imposing sense is available in some of the verbs, but not in this kenai stem. Okay, the active is not expressing imposing sense, but only the passive for these two stems, and it is less frequent in kenakan. And then wearing is only available for this stem, kenakan, in active and passive, though we know that this sense is the most frequent in the active. And then next is, yeah, wearing is not available for this stem in either voice. Okay, and hitting is available in kenai, predominantly in the active, less predominantly in the passive, and only very minor in kenakan. Okay, in active. So we have this complex of meaning and form pairings that we now try to capture or make sense using LFG analysis.
Okay, thank you, Day. So I'll talk about the LFG analysis in the second part of our presentation. So the basic purpose is how to capture the complex dynamics of meanings, interaction, meaning constructions that involve the root and the affixes, the transitivizers, can and e, and also the voice prefixes, mer and d, the actor voice and the passive voice. The main components of our LFG analysis consisting of two parts. One is the argument structure of the root and the affixes, because we adopt a morpheme-based analysis in which each of the formative, including the affixes, each of them has its own lexical entries. The second part is the principle by which predicates carried by each of the affixes combine with the other and result in argument fusion, and also later on we talk about meaning constructions within the word, the morphological construction that creates meanings. So things are a bit more complex because we talk about relative arguments, prominence, and also the restriction, the collocational restriction as seen in the empirical points that presented earlier by Gede in the previous slides. Certain things may create a restriction in the arguments that particular verb takes in particular sense. For example, wearing takes clothing as the object. So just quickly, in the argument structure, the information contained in the argument structure includes prominence. We do not go through all of the kinds of the prominence, but basically for simplicity, we just present the prominence in terms of semantic roles, where the presentation of the uppercase represent a more prominent role, and the lowercase represents a less prominent role, or also thematically specific role. So our argument structure representation for the root kana is something like this one. It means that it has the second argument, the P, which is also associated with the goal argument, is lexically prominent. And the first one, the theme, the causure, is optional. We'll talk about this in a moment. This basically says that kana is semi-transitive. It could be transitive with the theme present as subject later on, or as a non-subject, and P as the subject. We assume linking in which the basic principle of linking is prominent matching. We have the harmonic alignment. By default, more prominent arguments at the surface syntax like subject or pivot is linked to the most prominent argument at the argument structure. So taking example like cium, for example, in the cium is kiss, so it has the actor-like argument is a transitive argument structure. So by default, the actor is linked to subject. Okay, so that's the basic idea. But our root kana here is unique in a way. It is lexically specified as patient-oriented. All right, so in its bare form, kana is patient-oriented. So the P argument is more prominent. That is why then it's selected as the subject in its basic form. Okay, this is the example. Seperti orang yang kena hukuman. So orang, the person is the goal of patient, and then hukuman is the abstract theme applied to the person. All right. So that's the argument structure of the root kana. But kana comes with more complex meanings. We characterize the core part of the senses, the meaning is hit, all right? Part of this meaning hit, you have sub-senses, including the meaning of the sense of goal, a target, a path. You have this displaced theme, and then there is a sense of successfully affected, and then also negative evaluation, and you know, this is then associated with sense suffer. So these sub-senses interact later on with the senses, the meanings of kan and e, and also the functions of the voice prefix mon and d. So the basic, the root combined with the affixes in the process of derivation, the basic senses here may or may not be augmented, but may also interact and creating different senses, including what we already mentioned earlier with the sense imposed or subject to as the most frequent one. But also there are other meaning like where, which is constructed, but then the meaning is related to particular voice type, okay? And then we talk about distribution of senses in relation to particular voice. The principle, now we move on to the principle that govern the voice selection. All right, we adopt markedness theory within the optimality theory like analysis, in which a marking of a particular verb relates to particular linking, and each of the marking of the voice, including the transitivity later on, the transitifers like e and kan, carry certain constraint, and the constraints are in a way ranked, okay? So we wanna capture the idea of preferences. The empirical points that we observe from the earlier presentation is that particular sense may prefer particular type of voice. So we wanna capture the idea of preferences, and voice may or may not result in ungrammatical structures, but may also result in structures which are preferred in relation to particular voice type, okay? So, so we have the mark L, meaning that this is a highly specific, lexically specified linking, which is specified as positive constraint, meaning that a lexically specified argument linking can be unmarked, like kana. It can be unmarked, and the P can be linked to subject, for example. And this is the lexically specified and ranked very highly. On the other hand, and all of the in the middle here, the meaning of this representation is that if you link a particular argument to subject, you have to mark it. Okay, so there is a constraint, a negative constraint marked by a star here. So you have to link particular argument to subject, but you have to mark it. Okay, so when you want to link the A argument to subject, and you have to mark it with active voice. Okay, so active voice and passive voice carry mark 5, highly ranked negative constraint mark 5 and mark 5. Here we have a plus here to capture the idea of preference that I mentioned earlier. And here mark 1 is a low rank constraint. This is to capture the default ranking, the default linking, for example, of the A argument should be linked to subject in most cases, okay, unless other higher rank constraint is violated. So we want to capture in the basic form in most of the cases where the actor is linked to subject, but we also want to capture highly specific, lexically specified linking where in the bare form a non-A subject, a non-A argument can be also linked to subject. So that's the basic idea. So a lexical entry like kana carries a lexically specified prominence with P can be linked to subject. But once this kana enters larger derivation embedded in the derivational process, affixes like man or d, then the prominence of the root can be changed, altered, or augmented. So that's the basic idea. And now we want to talk a bit more very quickly about the lexical entries of the voice prefixes man and d. In our analysis, the voice prefix is not only just argument linking, it is a prefix that carries its own argument structure. It carries meaning in a way because it, there is evidence empirically that it combines with the root and can construct meaning. So it is just, like a predicate argument structure, argument taking predicate with taking particular argument, but then there is the so-called fusion here, or putting particular argument or augmenting it to become prominent. So the actor voice augments or fuse with the basis of the stems A and make it more prominent here, or the most prominent in the argument structure. Whereas the passive promotes the P as the most prominent argument, but at the same time, as we know, passive also demote the stems actor-like and demoted to oblique. Okay, crucially, as we said earlier, each of the affixes, so like man and d, also carries an OT order mark 5. So you have to have mark 5, a highly rank constraint here. And then the next point is the transitive E and can when it's combined with the root or the stem. It creates the so-called traditionally transitivizing effect. It creates transitive structure in which then we have the predicate composition, the composition between the predicate of can and E and the predicate of the stem. And during the process of that composition, you also have argument fusion and possibly altering or augmenting the arguments structure of the base. Traditionally, we talk about transitivizing. I think it's good to keep that term because E and can, in a way, is polysemous between causativization and applicativizations. The basic idea is can or E becomes causative when it introduces the causor. So during this composition, the causor, the agent causor is newly introduced to the structure, whereas it becomes an applicative, especially E, it is applicative locative when its locative argument is promoted to the argument structure. So we do not want to go through all of the types of diffusion because E and CAN carry different types of fusion, causative fusion, argument fusion, or applicative argument fusion. We refer you to Arka et al. 2009 for this, but we just mentioned a couple of fusion that is relevant for our discussion on Kena. So for Kena with the causative type for causative fusion, it will introduce the argument structure effect like this one, in which what is unique about the causative E is that it introduces the fusion of the embedded argument with the goal, questionative goal or locative patient. Okay, that's very important because this is the property that distinguishes E from CAN. So that's the meaning that we see later on, earlier on, and we will provide more discussion on that in a moment. So then when you have the affixation, the process is something like this one. For example, in mobil mereka dikenai pajak tinggi, this is the most frequent sense imposed or charge that we want to talk about here first. So what you have here is the argument structure of Kena combined with the E, and E comes with the causative transitive visor, and you have this fusion introduces here and become the goal here, okay, making it kenai. And then the passive has this argument structure by which the P is promoted to the most prominent argument, and this is the matrix argument structure. So then we have the P here, which is fused with P in kenai, which is actually the P goal here. So I put color here to show the how particular argument is fused and then identified to become the subject here. Okay, because it's P here is more prominent. It's with the passive become the subject, and the theme become the object of the passive. All right, but this is the basic idea of argument fusion involved in the predicate composition throughout the process of derivation. But things are more complicated because, as we already talked earlier, the root contains different senses, and CAN and E also carries their own meaning. The prefix, the voice prefix also carries their own argument structure and meaning. So we have this complex interaction when the root and the suffix, transitive visor, and the voice, becoming involved in the derivation. So the complication arises, and we see how different senses of the root are augmented because of the transitive visor also carries a similar sense. Okay, we talk about the E first. The suffix E carries a unique profile by which the argument introduced here or fused here is the locative or goal-oriented related argument. Okay, and the important point about this is that E carries a negative evaluation, which is not carried by CAN. Okay, this is very important. So we capture that negative evaluation with negative subscripts of effect. Okay, so this says that I am a suffix and I have an argument structure which carries the negative effectiveness, and the P of my patient is associated with goal or locative, and it is fused with the embedded argument. That's what it says here. So it comes then. So when E combined with Kena, and then you have the P goal here is the fuse here, okay, and then becoming the P here, the matrix P. Okay, and then by passive, it is then promoted to become the most prominent one. Okay, and then you see the why P becomes the subject here, because it's the most prominent one, and then selected or marked by D. But crucially, you have the senses of the root kena, you know, requires this idea of abstract entity with the theme associated with pajak, something abstract, and then the goal here, the senses activated here is the imposing one, contributing one here, the sense, but then we should say, given the empirical point, that this is only available, the meaning created, the imposed meaning created by passive only. That is to say, there is no actor voice counterpart of this meaning here. So we would argue that the sense impulse is created at the top node in the word structure, okay? Of course, the ingredients of the meanings come from the elements here, but it's, you know, this morphology create construction at the level of the passive. So that's the basic idea. Okay, and of course we have this evaluation negative. So mobil mereka dikenai pajak tinggi, the cars they were charged or imposed with high tax. So the meaning something associated with negative evaluations. I think I just skip this one because you know, there are other things that I want to talk about. So the basic point is you have another fusion. This is the type 5 one, which associated with physical contact heat. So earlier on, the earlier slide is just the abstract meaning of the theme, but here's the physical one. Okay, so you have a different type of fusion, but this physical context comes with something similar with the negative evaluation, but is something that only appears with kenai, okay, with kenai, but not kenakan because it's negative. Okay, so the basic point is just the same, but the different here is that now we have the actor voice here, by which you have the actor voice promoting or fusing the actor here, which is the causative. But the negative evaluation remains the same because it's carried by E. Okay. Now we wanna talk about the intriguing difference between E and kan. That is to say, only kan creates the meaning, the sense where, wearing something, okay, but not E. This is something to do with the negative evaluation, which is absent in kan. Kan expresses the salience given to the displaced theme rather than the goal negative effect like E, okay? So kan in our analysis carries a neutral or positive evaluation of the affectedness. So we put the plus subscript within brackets. So this is very important because we know that kan also carries the benefactive meaning, not E, but only kan. So this is something that can be captured very easily in our argument structure-based analysis. Okay, let's go through what creates the sense where. So the kan has this argument structure, lexical entry in the specification containing the argument structure like this. So I am kan, I'm a suffix. So I carry a positive affectedness, and then by which the actor is also fused with the patient here in a way reflexive, something that affected, something that affects the actor. And then, of course, the patient is also, and then also you have another fusion here with the P and A. So the basic point is that you have this positive affectedness meaning coming up here associated with kan, and it has a reflexive meaning in a way. So then in the example that creates the meaning wearing, aware, the sense wear. So this is the example. Mereka mengenakan seragam dinas. They are wearing official uniforms. So this can be explained in a way like this. This is a bit complex, but the basic idea is the same, but it involves different fusions. Okay, so you have kena, the same argument structure with kenakan. You have the positive evaluation coming from kan here, and then you have fusion, reflexive fusions, here, which means that something, the theme, displaced theme is in a way moved to be part of the actor. So this is the ingredients of wearing. So wearing is created here at the level of kenakan, because you can have the actor voice and also the passive voice. But the actor voice and passive voice just put different emphasis on the prominence. So in the actor voice here, the actor is given the prominence, and you have the actor becoming the subject. Okay, so this is the meaning that is created only by kan, but not e. And this is easily captured in the argument structure-based analysis that we propose here. Okay. Now we come to the last part of kan and e, where both kan and e, as we already saw earlier in the empirical evidence from the corpus, the usage, that both kan and e can be used to express imposed meaning in the passive voice. Okay, so well, this is explainable in terms of the notion of effectiveness that is shared by both kan and e. Remember that kan carries positive and neutral effectiveness, but e also carry effectiveness and negative one. But there is intersection properties here. Both carry effectiveness. Effect carries something, a path of change. You have displaced theme in both cases, but this is the basic idea that you share properties that allow both kan and e competing for the same senses here. Okay, so the outcome of kan and e in the derivation with kena create subtle conceptions, nuanced conception with effectiveness, carrying path with displaced theme, and you have different kinds of themes. This is important, whether the theme is concrete or not, and whether the theme is something wearable, because this is something to do with, when you have kan as the reflexive meaning of wearing. Yeah, okay. And also, we want to mention there is a socio-cultural aspect of evaluation, which we are not going to talk more here, other than saying that the evaluative meaning is there, by which you can have this abstract evaluation, whether something is positively or negatively evaluated, by which that kan and e can be alternatively chosen depending on the evaluations. So the kenakan or the kenai, it's possible in passive, where you have, because you have this overlapping properties by which kan and e are possible here. Okay. And then if you want to do that, how would you capture the precise interaction, which is very complex, involving the meaning and evaluation? And we want to do that with the lexical entry, which is specified with rich constraints. So this is something like this one. So you have the lexical entry kena, but then it comes with a set of equation showing different constraints. So this is something like, you know, so I am kena, so I carry this argument structure, but I also carry a set of constraints. And this is a disjunction here. I can be combined with can or e. Okay, so this is a conditional constraint. So if my larger structure contains a form can, so if I combine with can, so this will happen, something like that one. So if I combine with can, so my predicate composed with the predicate of can, and also during the composition, so the argument fusion for, so you may have more than one argument fusion. So we are interested in one here. If you know you have the argument fusion type 4, and then you have the goal is fused with the actor, okay, and the actor should contain the mark 5. So we want to capture that when you have wearing. So this is the reflexive one that we talked earlier. So the goal, the actor is highly constrained in a way it should be flagged by men or men, okay, the actor voice. So we want to capture that when you have the theme should be something wearable. So the meaning wearing here is chosen, and then it prefers the actor voice. That's what it says here, okay? Or else I can also combine with E. So if I combine with E, so my predicate composes with the predicate of E, and then you have, you know, I can have different argument fusions. And then, so when the argument fusion and then the semantic type of the thing that is fused, in particular the theme, should be something abstract, okay, to get that. This is the meaning of the impose one. So kena impose is the second one, okay? So this is something abstract. If something abstract coming in, so you have this constraints here, okay, set of constraints. And then the next one is the kenai and kenakan, where you have kenai and kenakan competing. They compete for the same sense, okay? So when you have kenai and kenakan competing for the same sense, so kan also carries a different, so here can carry something that is wearable, creating, imposing constraint where the object theme or the theme could, or the subject could be or should be something wearable. But can also carry something, you know, the theme could be abstract, something similar like concrete. Okay, so can and E, they compete for the same semantic space. But if you compete here, then the OT, optimality order associated with P, okay, then prefers the E one, okay? So when they compete, E is preferred. So we see, we can capture the empirical corpus-based data point that we talked earlier. Kenai is more frequent than kenakan when it expresses the imposed meaning. Remember that imposed meaning only available in the actor voice. Oh, sorry, the passive voice. Okay, so the conclusions now. So we have presented a corpus-based empirical evidence for the distribution of senses of kena and the complex word derived from kena, kenai, kenakan, where we see that senses like impose is very prominent, and then only passive is selected, okay? So we propose an argument structure-based analysis incorporating the OT type analysis, by which linking, voice type linking is preferred over the other. And also we saw that meaning senses can be constructed within the morphology on the basis of senses from the root, but it appears to be constructed at different level in the word structure. Okay, so we see that imposed subject sense is only available only in the passive. Okay, so the basic take-home point, most important point that we wanna show and argue here is that voice alternation is not always argument relinking process, even though we still see that it is possible when, especially when you have this concrete physical heating, for example, you can still see the alternation by which the voice acquires relink. But then it's not always the case that voice alternation is associated with argument relinking. It may also involve meaning creation. All right. So LFG is well equipped, as we have demonstrated, to capture the empirical points of complex interaction of meanings between the base kana and the derivation of kan and e. Okay. Well, we just presented kena, kenakan, kenai, mengenakan, dikenakan or dikenai. In fact, there are more verbs, more words derived from kena. This is something that we want to look at in the future. And also we have got Indonesian program by which we can test our analysis, whether it works or not. This is something that we want to do at some point. We also want to do some experimental research follow-up in elicitation tasks to answer how much this is the idea of cognitive aspect in the mind of the speakers. Okay, something that we want to look at some point in the future. All right, thank you for joining, and I'm looking forward to talk more and get feedback for the issues, and probably if you have similar data points, patterns from other languages, we are more than happy to talk more about that and welcome suggestion for further pointers. This is the reference, and thank you.